Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is Game 3 from the 2021 FIDE World Chess Championship match between Ian Nepomniachtchi, playing on the white end, and Magnus Carlsen. Going into Game 3, we are even, 1 point apiece. Let's see what would happen in Game 3. We once again revisit a Ruy Lopez. We saw this in Game 1, where the players... Jan had the white pieces in Game 1. Same story here in this Game 3. Play deviates from Game 1 on move 8. So let's get to that point right here. On move 8 in Game 1, we had h3 with knight a5 to follow. Black pursuing the bishop pair, white gets a pawn. In this game, move 8, a4, threatening to take on b5 because this rook is unprotected. Pawn would be pinned. That's addressed with bishop b7, some development. Each side secures their strongest pawn, their e-pawn. Typical maneuvering with the Ruy Lopez, queen knight drifting towards the king side. Standard move as well for black with rook to e8, bishop to f8. Something to note in this position is that when the rook is on e8, f7 is more sensitive. It's unprotected now, one attacker, one defender. If white pursues an attack against f7 with knight g5, the way to react to this, well, one way is you could simply go back and white really wouldn't have much better than to return with the knight. But black could play with d5. The idea being to meet pawn captures pawn with not knight takes pawn, as this would allow fried liver like variation. And this is looking pretty scary for black. You're in check, problem on d5. But black could follow with knight d4. And there's pressure here. And now this d5 pawn is hit 3 times. There is one cool variation I'd like to show from this position. This knight f7 move is something I tested out during the live stream. If this position surfaced, this would not be a good continuation for white because of the following. There is, after d6, knight takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, and can you spot the best move for black? Feel free to pause the video. Currently black is up a minor piece, and there is only one winning move. If you don't find this move, you're losing. Queen d5 and black would be winning. Black saves the queen and next can rescue the knight. Anyhow, this point is sensitive on f7, and this follow-up move is something you need to be prepared to meet, let's say. In the game, what do we have? It is knight f1, continuing on this repositioning towards the king side. There will be no knight g5 anymore. Flight squares in there as well, with h6. Bishop to d2 negates any knight a5 with c5 to follow. So this knight right here, as we'll see, has some difficulty. Currently it's in the way of the bishop and the pawn. All right, bishop f8, knight e3, and after knight e7, looking to get this guy rolling, maybe transferred to the king side as well, we have white taking action on the queen side with this committal c4 advance. Committal, why? Many gaps are now created, many holes on the queen side. One of the ideas with c4 is it's not allowing black to, let's say, put this pawn on c5. We have to address we have to address the pressure on b5 in some way. Black gives this point up, and in doing so allows this knight to take up a nice post on c4. And this is where it really starts to get interesting in this middle game. When the knight is on c4, black needs to take some care over the a5 square. This becomes a big focal point in this middle game. a5, the threat to maybe go there right now or maybe win a pawn. How exactly should black deal with a knight arriving on a5? Something that ran through my mind during the live stream of this event was to play the move rook b8. My idea being to meet knight a5 with tucking the bishop away. This reorganization of the black pieces is something we saw in game 2 of this event. There is an issue, however, with rook to b8. There is something I overlooked, which is this possible sacrifice. This knight doesn't have to go into a5. This is a possibility to take twice on e5, and then there's a problem on f7. It isn't losing for black, but yeah, it's going to be a position where white's up a pawn. Considered best for black is to give the piece back with knight e to d5. Okay. Anyhow, it's not only about knight a5, but recognize the pressure on e5. How does black offset the knight on c4? The knight returns to c6, keeping control over both of these points. So these two knights are really competing with one another. From here we have rook to c1. If this knight jumps into a5 instead, black would take, and this pressure on c7 isn't really an inconvenience to black. Black could step up. If additional pressure is placed on the c7 pawn, this guy can advance, and it's unclear what exactly this bishop is doing. Staring off into space, it's not really an inconvenience for black. However, after rook c1, now this move starts to be a bit scarier to black. So for example, if black doesn't do anything on the queenside, instead plays g6. Now when the knight is here and we have these captures, this is a little more uncomfortable. How are we defending the pawn? We can't easily get out of the pin in this situation. So what am I getting at? Black takes some steps at this moment here, move 16, to prevent the knight from getting to a5 altogether. How do we do this? We play a5 ourselves. The rook is now assisting in defending against knight a5. At the same time, the a5 pawn may be up for grabs, and white has an eye on that in playing bishop c3, possibly ready to add what's now a third attacker, or what would be a third attacker to a5, queen d2. From here, we have bishop to c8, and this is looking to interfere with white's attempt to simply win a pawn on a5. So, for example, if queen d2 is played at this moment, bishop e6 can be played, and if white takes the pawn on a5, we can have bishop takes bishop. There's knight takes knight, or, well, if knight takes knight, there's queen d7, and there's a problem here and here. Seems like black will be getting the pawn back, and if we simply recapture like this, rook takes pawn, we get the pawn back. So there are indirect means, in other words, or there are indirect ways to react to knight captures a5. We don't have to defend this point directly. Now, this bishop to c8 move is leaving black a little bit vulnerable. This square right here, this knight on c6 is unprotected, which now allows white to break in the center with d4. If white tried to play d4 at a different stage, let's say in this position, let me make a passing move instead of the move played in the game bishop c8. if black put the king in the corner. This isn't such a great idea. This pawn break isn't there because after these two captures, there isn't a threat of knight takes knight, and black would be allowed to pick up the e4 pawn. However, after this move, bishop c8, the move played in the game, this knight, being unprotected, allows for the central break d4. E takes d, knight takes d. No time to take on e4 in this case because the knight would be captured. And after black recaptures on d4, the queen gets to recapture and assist in defending e4 for a second time. So this point is secure. Bishop e6, once more in a position to deal with knight captures a5. Knight takes a5. There can follow not bishop takes bishop in this case. Now that the queen is on d4, if knight takes a5 in this position, once more black has a trick up his sleeve. c5 can follow. So this, in the end, will not be the win of some clean pawn. There's some messy variation that goes like queen d2, bishop takes bishop. If knight takes bishop, there's knight takes pawn. And considered best is first this. We have bishop takes pawn, pawn takes knight. Yeah, it gets pretty messy. In the end, it holds as around an evenish position in this messy looking position. Okay. After bishop e6, we have h3. Useful. Flight square, no minor piece jumps into g4. c6, now this is defended directly. We don't have c5, we want to stay strong still on the d5 square. c6 is regarded as one of the best moves. c6 or d5 on this move 21 for black are considered best. Bishop b3. Out of the line of fire, it was unprotected on b3, and now we have d5 met with e5. One of the things white gets out of the way of, with the bishop being on c2, is this pawn potentially going into Pac-Man mode, grabbing the knight and the bishop. With the bishop on c2 after this move 22, d5 can now be met with e5. And this is going to set off a chain reaction of captures, as we'll soon see. We're at move 23. By move 32 or 33, 5 sets of pieces are going to be exchanged. There are interesting lines that can come about after this d5 move. There are captures, knight recapture. Also, after this push, there can be maybe c5, maybe the queen still stay on board. It can turn lively, but this ends up liquidating right out of this middle game into an ending. d5 in this game is met with e5. The knights and the queens are exchanged. And soon the dark square bishops. It's important for white not to bite on b4. This would only be helping black. Black would be winning. 3-2 majority. Not a good idea for white to take on b4. In the game we have f takes g. The bishops are exchanged. In the end, if any side is maybe better, it would be white, because these two pawns offset these three. All right, well, let's just look at the c file. The c pawn negates 2 pawns. And on the king side, this is where white is stronger, 3 versus 2. King f1, rook b8. The rooks are exchanged. Rook b1. Have to exchange. There really isn't anything better for black. You can't really play with still another rook on board. If you try and operate on the d file, that's easily offset. No good entry points exist for the black rook, and this rook can maybe start thinking about hunting pawns on the queenside. So there really isn't any better than to exchange rooks, and we're left to this bishop-specific ending where white is kind of up a pawn again, looking at the king side, 3 versus 2 majority. But the black king takes up a very strong post that is going to fully compensate. Also keep in mind that this pawn right here, being on a light square, can always be observed by this guy, and because of this, that will place a restriction on white's bishop. It will have to play a defensive role. We'll see that take shape. For now, the black king stands much better. F5 is a nice follow-up, ensuring that this king could basically stay on this strong central post, this dark square E5. So after bishop c2, for example, instead of bishop c2, the move played in the game, if white tries g3, looking for next f4, black can always play f4 himself. And there really isn't going to be a great way to make progress here for white. If, let's say, king to f3, I'm not sure how much ground white is really making in this position. I should point out, first of all, there isn't time for g3. You would have to do something first about the h3 pawn. g3 straight away. There is no king f3, excuse me, because you have to tend to the h3 pawn. So let's say h4 at this moment. And now maybe white could simply stop the king from getting to f3 altogether. Play bishop to d5, or maybe better yet, give this check. Not even allow the king to approach, not even allow the white king to put some pressure on f4. It's very difficult for white to make progress. Very strong post by this black king. So from here, what do we have? Bishop c2, f4. Black pawn goes to c5, so that this guy is just a blink away to apply pressure to a4. Bishop c2, bishop d7, f3. If ever this move is on board, again, if these two moves are on board, I think black does well to simply hold ground, not even bite, not even capture on g3, just be in a spot to meet g takes f with king takes f, and the king is only improved from e5 to f4. So what we have is f3, king f6, h4, king e5, king f2, king f6, and these guys are just going back and forth at this point. After move 41, a draw is agreed to, and game 3, we remain level after game 3, 1.5 points apiece. Is there anything to try in this ending? I don't believe so. So, for example, after king f2, at this point right here, after king f6, is this something? I don't believe so, because you could take and then get your king back to this square. And if this pawn is here, look at this strong king post on f6. It's tough to do anything with this strong king on f6. Try this. There's always the check. There isn't time to block. You get this pawn. So yeah, you could get the pawn on f4, but how does the king play a role? I'm not seeing it. So there are many different ways the structure can change on the king side, but there's never really going to be winning chances here for white. The black king will be able to find a strong post on a dark square, and this bishop again will always remind white's bishop, you have a responsibility. This isn't just any pawn that can be given up. Without it, this guy bolts. So at the end of the day, this one is a draw after move 41. And these guys are playing like machines. Let's have a look at the tail of the tape on this one, and you can see for yourself. How do you like that one? Pretty much a flatliner for the whole game. And that's as accurate a game as you're really going to see. We have all goose eggs. No inaccuracies, mistakes, or blunders for either side. Nepomniachtchi registering a 3 average centipawn loss, and Carlsen a 2. Super high quality play from these guys. Neither one has blinked yet, but there's still a lot more games to go. Okay. Anyhow, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.